Welcome back to another episode of 40 Facts About the 40K Universe. I am your host, Gershwin, and today we're going to be talking about the Eldar as we get into the lore on an Exarch. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. We post Warhammer 40K lore videos every single day. If you have any suggestions for topics, please comment down below, and if you enjoy our content, thank our patrons on Patreon. It is because of them that we can do this. Link in the Oh, damn, am I getting sick? Link in the description if you guys want to support. But with that said, let's get into 40 facts on the Exarchs. Every member of the Aeldari race must learn to temper their extremely powerful psychic minds through a practice known as following the Eldar paths. One of the craft world's most useful, yet dangerous paths is that of the warrior. Every Aeldari that follows the path of the warrior must draw from the anger and hatred deep in their heart, which is the most powerful of Eldar emotions, therefore the most dangerous. Those Eldar that tread this difficult path of the warrior don't do so because they're interested in the teachings or experiences of the path, but rather because of a terrifying event in their life that usually unhinge their mental balance, such as a terrible personal failure or the loss of a loved one. Usually, the uncontrolled anger that comes from this monumental moment pollutes the work and life of an Eldar. These Aeldari will then be subtly led by the craft world's infinity circuit to one of the warrior shrines, where they will encounter the shrine's caretaker, usually an Exarch, that welcomes them and starts leading them down the path of the warrior. Whatever aspect of war they ultimately choose to embody, each aspect warrior must learn to do what in the Eldar lexicon is known as donning and removing one's war mask. This means learning to segment the mind so that it is possible to enter a state of heightened aggression and bloodlust when necessary, and then safely return to everyday life when the demands of war have ended. This is the most important lesson of the path of the warrior, and only when an Eldar has successfully learned it will he be allowed to change paths by his guide. This guide is also usually an Exarch. An Exarch is an Eldar who has become lost in the path of the warrior. He is unable to remove his war mask and exists in a permanent state of aggressive bloodlust, seeking out battle and strife. There is no predetermined pattern to become an Exarch. Some warriors do so after their first engagements. The visceral sensations of killing the enemy and losing comrades overwhelms their minds. Others do so only after a long time. Some can avoid the pull of the Exarch, sensing that they have begun to lose themselves in this war mask. These individuals switch their paths with due haste to avoid the fate. But once the aspect warrior becomes unable to remove his war mask, the others of his shrine will quickly become aware of it, and the shrine Exarch will bar him from further access to the aspect shrine, sadly informing his former ward that the next time they meet, they will be greeted as equals. The Exarch-to-be, often furious at the rejection, will then wander around the craft world, trying to go on with his former life, but will soon find himself unable to do so. Other Eldar will shun and avoid him, and he will find himself unable to meaningfully communicate with those few that would dare answer him. His past activities will hold no appeal, and his only desire will be to return to his shrine and make war. At this point, the Infinity Circuit will once again intervene and guide the warrior's steps to one of the shrines of his chosen aspect, whose Exarch has fallen in battle. He will enter the shrine and don the former caretaker's empty Exarch armor. Once he places the helmet upon his head, his fate will be sealed. He transforms into a living incarnation of war, a servant of Caleb and Chicane, an outcast amongst his own people, yet at the same time, one of its greatest protectors. Exarchs are regarded with both awe and revulsion by the other Eldar. When an Eldar lost in any other path passes on, his spirit stone will be added to the craft world's infinity circuit. His excesses will be forgiven. Not so for an Exarch. The fusion of a soul so tainted with bloodlust and so dedicated to Cain within the infinity circuit would slowly see it corrupted with bloody madness. When he dies, an Exarch's spirit stone is absorbed into his armor, and so over time an Exarch's armor ultimately becomes a miniature infinity circuit. In truth, an Exarch is actually an Eldar body inhabited by a multitude of Eldar souls. The collective will mingles and assumes the name and mannerisms of the first inhabitants of the Exarch armor. But the Exarch can draw on the experiences and personalities of the entire multitude of experiences. Other Eldar are horrified by this, believing that an Exarch's existence is akin to living death. On the very rare occasion that an Exarch interacts with an Eldar who is not part of the path of the warrior, he will feel only fear, revulsion, and pity. In day-to-day life, an Exarch serves as a caretaker of the Aspect Shrine and the Aspect Warrior's arms and armor. He will also train the aspect warriors, instilling proficiency with their chosen war gear and teaching them the underlying philosophy of both the path of the warrior and their particular aspect's approach to it. He will guide them in duels and mock battles and in training exercises to augment their stamina and awareness. But most important of all, the Exarch will teach them how to don and remove their war mask, how to call on their hatred, and how to ignore and safely store it in their minds when the time for battle has ended. It is for this reason that for all of their pity and revulsion, that Exarchs are held in high respect by the Eldar, for none can teach the Eldar how to avoid the pitfalls of the path of the warrior better than one who has fallen himself to its siren calls so many times across so many different lives. When an Exarch's body dies, whether from age or the battlefield, his armor will be brought back to the Aspect Shrine to wait for a new bearer who will restart the cycle anew by adding his soul to the armor's collective link. There are only two possible exceptions to this cycle. The first is when an Exarch is chosen to become a young king. The impersonation of the long-dead Eldar hero, Eldanesh, and the bloody sacrifice who will awaken Kane's avatar on a given craft world. The chosen Exarch will strip of his or her armor, and his spirit stone will be ritually severed from it. This will also remove the Eldar's individual soul from the collective pool of souls that is the Exarch. The young king will then have the runes of war, one of each aspect, carved into his back. Clad in his own blood, he will then don a cloak and be given the avatar's weapon. He will boldly step forward into Kane's shrine, and the doors will close behind him. A few moments later, the avatar of Kane, fully empowered, will walk out and go to war. Of the young king, no trace will remain, for he will have been consumed, body and soul, by the one sleeping power of Kane that lay dormant within the Craftworld's infinity circuit. The second exception of the cycle of the Exarch's life is on those rare occasions when a Phoenix Lord falls. Similar to a normal Exarch, a Phoenix Lord can be revived when an Exarch of the Aspect dons his armor. However, in the case of a Phoenix Lord, there is no collective mingling of souls. His pre-fall soul is so old, so strong, that it will be absorbed and consumed by all the lesser Exarch's collective souls in the process, leaving only himself alive once more to bring the fierce joy of battle and blood to the enemies of his people. There have been countless Exarchs throughout the long history of the Aeldari, and to better understand the tumultuous life of those who are lost during the path of the warrior, one only needs to look at the journals of the Exarch of the Striking Scorpion's Shrine on the Craftworld of Yondon, Elshar. Elshar would eventually become a young king and sacrifice himself to raise the avatar of Kane against the human worshippers of chaos. Elshar climbed up and threw himself flat just before reaching the brow of the hill. From this vantage point, he surveyed the surrounding terrain. The place had been a park before the uprising, before the followers of chaos had raised their standard on this world. Once there had been green trees, flower beds, and shady nooks, but Elshar did not care. He was an Exarch, and beauty and peace meant nothing to him. For him a tree was just another piece of cover. A valley was a place to be temporarily out of the enemy's line of sight. A shadow was a place where death might lurk. For an Exarch, there could be no peace. There were simply times when the killing stopped, when the warriors could hone their skills before the next battle. Once so long ago he can barely remember, it had been different. He had lived in his own chambers and followed a different destiny, a different path. He had memories of a time where he knew friendship, joy, and laughter, but that was before he heard the call of the Avatar, before he had become locked into the role of the Eternal Warrior. Those memories really belonged to someone else, to a being he once was, a person that had no relevance to his life today. He caught sight of movement up ahead. He ducked back and gestured to a squad of striking scorpions to halt. Years of constant training under his supervision had taught them to respond instantly to his command. They froze, becoming still as statues, into immobilities that drew no watching eyes. Elshar threw himself flat and scuttled, like a scorpion, up the slope on his hands and knees. He kept himself flat and low as he crossed the top of the slope, and found cover in a moonberry bush on the other side. He froze instantly and watched. Any second he expected a blast of enemy fire to cut him down, and yet at that idea he felt no fear. Only a dim sense that it would be a waste of his life without taking any of the enemies with him. His eyes studied the ravaged landscape, indexing the craters and the bushes and the burned-out trees, noting the points where the enemies might lurk, where lethal crossfire might be set up, or where the killing grounds might be. Once he might have been appalled by the waste of beauty and the torment the land had been put through. He could remember a time when the sight of a dead body would have made him sick, but that happened to that other person when he was young, after his first battle, When the horror and the fear had combined in a terrible reaction, there could be no such reaction now. A dead body was simply that, a husk that no longer contained a soul, a vehicle without a driver. He wondered when the slow, irreversible process of emotional petrification had begun. Perhaps when he first donned his aspect suit, when he had been like young Guranel back there, just beginning the study of the path of the Scorpion. That had certainly marked the beginning of a change, but it was not what changed him into an Exarch. No, that probably came on Talanoth, when he had witnessed the demonic keeper of secrets devour the soul of the howling banshee called Sierra, and his entire squad had been slain except for him. He had known others who had gone mad after a battle, but he did not. He had chosen to preserve his sanity in the only way he knew. He had elected to become as proficient a death dealer as it was possible for him to become. His patience was rewarded. He caught sight of a human figure moving forward through the trees. Their battered armor and ill-maintained weapons marked them as rebels. The Eye of Horus sign on their banner reinforced that impression. They advanced cautiously. As he watched, he saw their leader kneel and speak into a Vox communicator. They seemed to be unaware of his presence. His hand tightened involuntarily on the grip of his web of skulls. It was the sight of the Chaos banner that did it. In the frozen core of his mind, he felt that icy hatred flare. Talanoth had been a watershed for him, as it had been for so many others aboard the light in the infinite darkness. All of the Craftworld's warriors had been changed by their encounter with the demon and his minions. It had been at that point when he first realized that death, and worse than death, was possible for him. Till that fateful day, he had been used to the idea that when he died, his soul would be taken into a soul stone and patched into the infinity circuit aboard the Craftworld. He had thought that after his body died, his soul would be preserved forever, in constant contact with the millions of other Craftworld dead. After Talanoth, he had known that there was a worse fate waiting. He had seen Sierra's soulstone devoured by the demon as surely as Slaanesh had devoured the soul of the ancient Eldar. He had known that not even the final refuge of the Aeldari race was safe, and since that day, he was troubled. The humans advanced now. They moved warily, their heads scanning from side to side as they moved into the little valley. Their weapons were held in positions of exaggerated wariness. Occasionally, they would exchange nervous words in their guttural, croaking language. They all seemed young and clumsy to him. Their movements lacked grace, just as their language lacked beauty. Mankind seemed like such an ill-made race to him. Nonetheless, he knew that their weapons were deadly. In the distance, he heard the rumbling of tracks, and knew that some sort of tank was on the move. The Farseer's predictions were accurate then. There was to be a major thrust across the parkland towards the Eldar landing site. He knew it was imperative for them to stop the humans here, so that more warriors and materials could be transported down from the Craftworld ship and a beachhead established. It struck him that at that moment, across the vast city, this scene was being replicated 1,000 times. In buildings, parklands, ruined temples, and twisted alleys, man and Eldar waited and watched, each prepared to deal violent death to the enemy. The thought seemed irrelevant to him, so he dismissed it. The important thing here was to fight and to win. Nothing else mattered. He took deep regulated breaths. His muscles were loose, ready to respond in an instant to his mind's command. Once at a time like this, he would have been tensing and relaxing his muscles to keep them limber, to ease out the nerve-wracking tension. Now he was relaxed, in a state of constant readiness. For all the difference it made, he might as well have been back in the temple chamber, practicing with his weapons. And he knew, as a master fencer knows the strength and weaknesses of his blade, that such relaxations would have made a difference. He knew he would not freeze when the moment of fight came. He knew he would not stand muscle-locked, mind-numb, with terror waiting for the killing blow to fall. The nearest human was within striking distance now. It was time. Elshar sprang, whirling the web of skulls in his hand. He felt the killing power in the weapon even as he released it. It spun through the air like an enchanted bolas. Each heavily weighted skull smashed into a target, smashing bone and crushing heads. 3 men fell, and with an eerie whine the web turned to his hand. The humans stood frozen in shock. Their leader shouted a hasty order to them, and they began to swing their weapons to bear. They were too slow. Elshar lashed out the web of skulls once more. It whirled among the men, sending them flying unconscious to the ground. The last survivor turned to run. Elshar watched him go. He twitched his weapon in his hand, feeling the weight of it. The human had almost reached the cover of the tree when Elshar let it fly. The weapon surged out, wrapping itself around the man's throat, choking the very life out of him. When the aspect warriors of Elshar's squad arrived, there was nothing for them to do except dispatch the wounded. And those were 40 facts on the Aeldari Exarch. more Eldar lore to come. If you guys want a better, more detailed version of what the Eldar path is, check out our 40 facts on the Eldar path. We go into detail as far as what the different aspects are and all that kind of stuff. We're also going to create a 40 facts video on the Path of the Warrior, just all on its own, where we go into deeper detail and talk about every single shrine. So subscribe to the channel to get that, and check out the Eldar videos that we already have on that as well. I hope you guys are staying safe. I hope you guys are enjoying us read the lore, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. This was Gershwan with One Mind Syndicate signing out.